You are now watching The Beach.
Super Mario Bros. Took the world by storm when it released all the way back in 1985. It was one of the first games to truly feel like an adventure in an era of mostly single-screen experiences. With its tight platforming, excellent level design, and memorable characters, it's no wonder why the game had the impact that it did. And with such success came successors. From a Yankees perspective, we got Super Mario Bros. 2, the one that's a lie and is apparently worse than Mario teaches typing. Then we got Super Mario Bros. 3, and of course, games like Super Mario Land 1 and 2, Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, New Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, and Super Mario Odyssey. I could list them all to increase the runtime, but that would be delirious. Like the time the Dr. Mario germs got out of the bottle.
A little kid might come along and think we were candy. That would be awful because we're medicine. This is serious. Serious. We could make you delirious. Delirious. You should have a healthy fear of us. Fear of us. Too much of us is dangerous.
All jokes aside, the Super Mario series has remained mostly consistent throughout the world. Almost all the mainline games saw an official release internationally because remember, Mario was the next best thing to partying like Charlie Sheen in the 1980s. But there are some exceptions. We all know the story behind Super Mario Bros. 2. Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels is Japan's Mario 2, and that was initially supposed to be the sequel that we got, but considering the game was too difficult and too iterative, Nintendo decided to iterate on another game, Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, which became the Super Mario Bros. 2 we've come to know and love. And in Japan, it's known as Super Mario USA. This was a huge win in my book. We never would have gotten Doki Doki Panic to begin with, so we'd be missing out on one of the best NES games of all time. And Mario 2 brought a lot new to the series, many elements which have become staple, and we did eventually get the Lost Levels, so it's all good. But what if I were to tell you that there is a Super Mario Bros. Game that is so obscure you might not have even heard of it? It was only released in Japan, and apparently South Korea. Considering how unknown the game is, it seems like it would have been exclusive to the North. Hey Kim, you playing this game? It also wasn't even released for a Nintendo console. In fact, it wasn't even developed by Nintendo. During the 1980s, Nintendo had a partnership with Hudson Soft to make games for Japanese computers. Most of the games were ports of Famicom games, but there were a few sequels to arcade games such as Donkey Kong 3 and Mario Bros. But by far the most notable game to come out of that project was Super Mario Bros. Special. Super Mario Bros. Special is a full-on sequel to Super Mario Bros. It has brand new levels and even new mechanics. But the thing is, Nintendo has never re-released this game. In fact, they haven't even acknowledged it. Made by another developer on a console that's not Nintendo and essentially wiped out of existence? You know what this sounds like?
You know what they say, all toasters toast toast.
If that's anything to go by, this is not a good sign. Usually when Nintendo doesn't even acknowledge something, that means it's likely going to be very, very bad. My intrigue with Super Mario Bros. Special peaked, and I wanted to play what is perhaps the most obscure game in the Super Mario series. Unlike Hotel Mario, I didn't need to get another system to play it, and it was fairly easy to set up. There are two versions of the game, the original for the PC-88 and another for the Sharp X1. The PC-88 version is virtually unplayable, with no scrolling whatsoever, and atrocious graphics, and apparently, you can't even get past World 4-4, but that probably has to do with the ROM circulating being a corrupted image. The Sharp X1 version fares better, which is what I decided to play. So the question is Super Mario Bros. Special something truly special, or is it as bad as it looks? Our story begins with Bowser capturing Peach, and Mario needs to save her. You'll travel across 8 worlds to do so, encountering many pesky toads along your way. It's the same story as before, but this time around, Luigi isn't present at all. But could you really blame the guy? Luigi, Peach got captured again! We gotta rescue her! Ugh, Mario, do you realize that we had rescued her In Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, the Super Mario Bros. Game based on the radio show, versus Super Mario Bros., all within the span of not even a year, and you're asking me to rescue her again? Come on, Luigi, it'll be fun. Mario, you know what all this makes you? A hero? No, it makes you a simp. Now let me just relax and get my high score in Junior Pac-Man. Story is nice to have, but as always, gameplay is the most important factor in a game, especially in a platformer. So let's see what makes Super Mario Bros. Special so special. Gameplay-wise, it seems to be just like the first game. Mario can run, jump, stomp on enemies, and collect coins just like before. But looks can be deceiving, because my goodness, the control is not what you'd expect. The physics feel off, and Mario's control is so slippery. Oftentimes when you jump on a platform, you won't even land in place. Mario will sometimes fall off the platform for no reason. It's like the platforms have invisible banana peels, and when you jump, it sometimes ends up shorter than what you're attempting to do. Honestly, I played bootleg games that have better physics, and already, this is a pretty nasty start. I did eventually get used to the controls, but only to the point where I could tolerate them. I never found them to be enjoyable or found myself to have mastered them, but at the very least, everything does what you'd expect. I mapped the keyboard to a controller, and it's the same setup as an NES controller, just without start and select. Already, things aren't looking too good, but oftentimes, I can forgive subpar controls if the game is interesting, just like in Super Mario Land. The level design is pretty much what you'd expect, and the tropes from the original game are present here as well, meaning that the theming of the second level being underground and the third stage taking place in the trees remains the same here, but the level design is different. Super Mario Bros. Has masterfully crafted level design. They do a great job introducing new mechanics, and then progressively getting more challenging as the game goes on. Let's take World 1-1 for example. It introduces Goombas as the first enemies, showcasing that you can stomp on them. Then as it progresses, you'll encounter Koopas and bottomless pits, and it showcases all the power-ups, with the ending giving you a chance to become invincible. And World 1-3 is all about getting familiar with tight platforming. Special does have those tropes, but the design itself just feels like standard level design in the first world. To be fair, it is a sequel, but the point is that the level design in World 1 and even World 2 isn't all that engaging. I will say, it's pretty cool that in World 1-2, you can take a pipe out to a courtyard with more enemies before reaching the goal. But there is one thing Super Mario Bros. Special has right away that the original didn't. Oh my goodness. The performance here is absolutely awful. It runs about as well as Cartman during the Olympics. Fittingly, the Special Olympics. Back in the day, Nintendo did put out powerful consoles. The Famicom is a great example. Super Mario Bros. Is known for its incredibly smooth scrolling, and it's easy to know what you're doing. But in Special, the scrolling is more Zelda-esque. Every segment of a level is a single screen, and then it'll scroll to the next. Now to be fair, it was even worse in the PC-88 version, which had no scrolling whatsoever, just a blank screen between segments. But this is not a smooth experience, and this is the better version. There's also quite a bit of slowdown, especially when multiple enemies are on screen at once, and the game is overall very unpolished. There are so many glitches I've encountered. Some softlock the game until the time runs out, and others cause enemies or platforms simply not to appear. Like in World 4-1, Lakitu won't even show up sometimes. He's going out for a smoke. Even he's had enough. And there's also a vine that takes you to a coin heaven you can't even escape. More like coin hell, leaving Mario stuck between two pipes with nothing to do but wait for the time to run out. Now you know what it feels like to be a Goomba, don't you, Mario? More like Lonely Mario. Give this man a Game Boy to play for the rest of his life. Playing this game gives me flashbacks to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It is that bad, but there is something to consider. The PC-88 and Sharp X1 were not exactly designed for games, let alone something as grand in scope like Super Mario Bros. In this case, the performance issues make sense. Hudson likely tries to squeeze whatever they could out of the limited hardware to create an experience at least resemblant to Super Mario Bros., whereas with Pokemon, it's a combination of laziness and mismanagement, not the hardware itself. It does excuse it in Special's case, but that doesn't make it any more enjoyable. But hey, as a wise Pokemon shill once said, I misunderestimated the power of the Switch. Oh wait, that's just George Bush. No, the quote is, "If you ignore the game, then it's amazing." So let's try to see if we can ignore Super Mario Bros. Special's performance to determine if there could be a spark of hope for this so far turbulent game. As I stated before, World 1 doesn't leave a very impactful first impression, more so a kinda yucky one. World 2 on the other hand is just as vanilla, if not more. There are some cool elements like a night section after going in an underwater pipe, but it doesn't really have much special about it. Remember the Cheep Cheep Bridge and how exhilarating it was in Super Mario Bros.? Well here, it's too easy. The Cheep Cheeps move fairly slow and are super easy to dodge. There is more tricky platforming, but oftentimes it can get really frustrating because of the controls. After defeating Fake Bowser 2 and rescuing yet another non-perky Toad, I was almost ready to give up. Just look at what Luigi did. But getting into World 3, I was genuinely shocked. Super Mario Bros. Special has all the power-ups from the original. The Super Mushroom and Star are here, and the Star Man is happier than ever to be here. The Fire Flower is also present, and oddly seems to transform Mario into Luigi. That's not me. Nah, it's just Mario in a lime green shirt with lemon yellow overalls. Who would have thought the Fire Flower would be a good source of vitamin C?
Hey Mario, why'd the Fire Flower go blind? He was low on vitamin C.
But there are, shockingly enough, some new power-ups. World 3-2 introduces the Wing, which allows Mario to fly in the air, making it the first ever flight power-up in a Mario game. And in 3-4, the Hammer from Donkey Kong makes an appearance alongside the barrels. Considering where it's positioned, it's not very useful, but it's still cool to see regardless. These power-ups are really cool, but unfortunately, they are very well hidden and are heavily underutilized. If they were more frequent, I would be joyful to the Power Moon and back. But as they stand, they're fun little Easter eggs to find, but don't really do much in terms of the game. But it's not just limited to power-ups. Classic enemies like Sidesteppers and even Fighter Flies also make a return and can't be stomped on, providing even more challenge as well as being really cool to see. I'm a huge fan of the original Mario Brothers, you know, the game where you stomp Koopas, and I feel it isn't acknowledged enough. References to it are always welcome, but the coolest thing about World 3 and beyond is that the level design becomes far more interesting and creative. One segment of a level takes elements from an underwater stage and puts them in a ground stage, giving it a really cool Atlantis vibe. And there's even Hudson spelled out with the blocks in the World 4 Castle Maze. While it's nothing mind-blowing, the levels really start to feel fresh starting with World 3. I've also noticed quite a few sections require Small Mario. They're always bonus sections, and sometimes you can skip entire levels. No Mario game except for Super Mario Land 1 did this, because in order to become Small Mario, you have to get hit. It's not like the Mini Mushroom. Becoming Small Mario is a punishment, yet that punishment is rewarded? This is such a strange game. A surprising amount of new mechanics are here, such as with the new power-ups and enemies, and there is creative level design, but Super Mario Bros. Special doesn't take advantage of them. There are some levels where the hammer could really be useful, yet it's only present once in a blue Power Moon. Same goes for the Wing. There's potential considering that these elements are already in the game, yet they're hardly used at all. So the reality is, Super Mario Bros. Special is like Super Mario Bros. And has some creative level design, but it doesn't go all the way, and it's hindered by bad controls and bad performance. Maybe the presentation will fare better? Super Mario Bros. Special uses the same sprites from Super Mario Bros. The designs are mostly identical, and everything looks accurate solely from a design perspective, but because of limitations, the color palette is really weird. Mario dons yellow overalls and looks similar to how he did on the Donkey Kong Jr. cabinet. Those early Nintendo games, man. Mario's design was hardly ever consistent. The enemies and environments do have their accurate colors for the most part though. The overall game just has a really bizarre neon look to it. Reminds me of the Problem Solvers. If they played Super Mario Bros., this would be the one that they would play. But it doesn't look bad. Music, however, is inconsistent. All of it is from the original, but it's sped up. Again, limitations. It mostly sounds decent, but not as good as the original, of course. I do like the underwater theme rendition, though. it sounds like circus music, perfect for when you're browsing Nintendo Twitter or Reddit, and the sound effects in the game are decent as well. Unlike the game itself, the game fares better handling the limitations with the presentation. Super Mario Bros. Special has 32 levels, just like the original. Even to this day, that's a decent enough amount for a 2D platformer, and a lot of the levels are fun to play, but the game is challenging by design and due to poor controls and physics as well. I would maybe be able to put up with it more if there were continues. That's right, when you lose all your lives, you have to start all over from World 1 again. I tried playing the game just in one go, but it was incredibly frustrating, because oftentimes when I lost, it wasn't my fault. So for my sanity and for the sake of capturing footage, I use save states. I don't ever use them, unless it's to resume progress in a game without a save feature, like Mario 3. If I just use them to save between levels, and just to avoid archaic game over screens and no continues, then I don't feel so bad, because I still had to clear the levels, but my overall thoughts on the game would remain the same regardless. There is a good amount of content, but it will mostly come down with how much you're willing to put up with, because there's so much bringing the game down, all in exchange for an experience that isn't all that spectacular. You might think this is where I deem Super Mario Bros. Special as a lost cause, but the good news is, Super Mario Bros. Special was given the chance to be something truly deserving of the name Special many decades after it released. In 2021, a version of Super Mario Bros. Special was released for the NES known as Super Mario Bros. Special 35th Anniversary Edition. Created by Frantic, it's a modification of Super Mario Bros., complete with all the levels from Special and all the new power-ups and enemies. While there were attempts to recreate it on the NES before, this is the only one that managed to incorporate every new aspect, making it indeed special. This is by far the best way to play the game. It has smooth scrolling and plays just like Super Mario Bros., and you can fully appreciate what Hudson was going for without the limitations. And honestly, it's a pretty great Mario game. I'd say even better than the first game. Frantic's work here is really impressive, and I've been playing the heck out of it on my custom Famicom Mini. I was honestly considering doing just a retrospective of this version, just considering how dang good it is, but I wanted to showcase the original Super Mario Bros. Special, just because of how fascinating it is, and how it's one of Mario's most obscure adventures. So far we've established Super Mario Bros. Special has mostly fun and creative level design, despite a slow start, and the presentation is decent as well, but is completely bogged down by bad controls and bad performance. So what's the verdict? It's rough, and I didn't want it to be this way. A game like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet or Nintendo Switch Sports, well, I'll gladly bash those with a grin on my face. But this is a case where Hudson did attempt to make a somewhat competent version of Super Mario Bros. For a system that just wasn't capable, not to mention a sequel to the most popular game ever made. But as the saying goes, if you can't port it, then just don't. I'd say even the Atari 2600 Nintendo games are more competent. The game clearly was a technical feat for the time, and it's not something Nintendo should feel embarrassed about. I could see the CDI games, but not this. There's a reason why you haven't seen Demich's Fury, because I do see the ambition here, and it's clear Hudson had a vision. I do think it's worth acknowledging and re-releasing for preservation's sake, but still, the game is horrible. The original Super Mario Bros. Special gets the ranking of trash. However, Super Mario Bros. Special 35th Anniversary Edition gets the ranking of treasure. Really, this should have been made for the Famicom, but I'm glad Hudson's ambition for the Mario series was fully recognized, because even though the honeybee flew away back to the hive, they gave us a heck of a party with the Mario Party series. So there you have it. We took a look at the most obscure Super Mario game ever made. And in the next episode, we'll be taking a look at the game that brought 2D Mario back into the mainstream. Join us for a retrospective concluding the new Super Mario Bros. Saga with a retrospective of the original New Super Mario Bros. Expected within the next week. So what do you guys think? Have you played Super Mario Bros. Special? Or the better question is, would you? Let me know in the comments and keep calm and dada on.